Welcome to the Get Published podcast, sponsored by Brodie Consulting Group. To get more information about our coaching, publishing, executive ghostwriting, and podcast production services, go to getpublishedpodcast.com. Hello, I am Paul Brodie, and thank you for joining us for another episode of the Get Published podcast, where we help authors get published with a proven system that works. Today, we're being joined by Paul and Lizzie Ayoub, author of Inspire Me, a father-daughter book of quotations to motivate, teach, and inspire. Lizzie and Paul, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's go ahead and get started. And our first question, I'd like to know, what is the one piece of advice that you would give to a first-time author who is currently writing their book?
Ooh, good question. I would say don't underestimate the amount of time it will take to get you published end to end. There are a lot of pieces involved in this process, many we didn't know about until we were, halfway in. So do research, talk to people who have done it, listen to podcasts like this one, because you can learn a lot from what others did and maybe what others didn't do but wish they had done. And I think that would have been really helpful if we had done a little bit more research and just learned from others' experiences up front.
And I would add that I think it's real important to have a clear sense of purpose. These books take incredibly long time to put together. Even the books. And so if you have a clarity of purpose and a real vision of what the throughput is, it really helps to motivate you and also have a clear path forward, because there are a lot of distractions along the way. So in our case, for example, our clear purpose was to have a book that would not only be good when it came out, but good for years to come as a source of inspiration, and also to benefit St Jude Children's Research Hospital, where all the profits go. And we stuck to those principles, and also that it was a father-daughter project. And that really helped us endure a lot of distractions and obstacles along the way.
And Paul, I'm going to ask you to repeat that first part. We lost your phone connection for probably the first about 10 to 15 seconds. So if you just repeat that first part for us.
Okay. Are we good now? Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. So I think what I would add is that it's also important to have a clarity of purpose and a clear vision for what you want as a throughput for the book to help you keep a discipline to what can be a very challenging process.
And what do you feel is the hardest part about getting published?
I think this is piggybacking off of my original answer, but just how many details go into this. So when I pick up a book now, for example, I have such an appreciation for everything about it. The spacing of the title, the Oxford comma use or not Oxford comma use that's consistent throughout, the binding. There are just so many details that go into this. I remember sitting at our dining room table talking about the color and width of the bookmark ribbon, or do we want a bookmark ribbon? So just the vast amount of details that go into it.
And I would second that and also say that it's real important to have a good team. So our publisher, Humble Hughes and Michael Winston, they had experience with this. They knew some of the things we needed to anticipate, and they helped us move through them so that we could go from concept to final book a little easier than we might have otherwise. So the publisher is really a partner with you in this process, and they helped us really do more. They took our concepts and helped us make them more tangible. And I thought that was a critical part of the process for us.
Well, let's talk about marketing. So please share a marketing strategy that you have used in your book launch that has worked well.
Sure. So there's probably not one book that every single person in this world wants to read, and that's okay. Especially, I'm definitely a people pleaser, and I want a book that appeals to everyone, but I think coming to terms with the fact that the book we're going to put out there is going to appeal to certain people and certain segments, and being intentional about marketing to those specific segments rather than trying to get the book in every single person's hands. So rather than trying to target everyone, just being really thoughtful about who you want to target, who your audience is, and then creating individual plans for those segments or those people. So as an example, just a few segments that we thought of. Obviously, our book is a father-daughter book, so dads and daughters. Universal times dads and daughters would want to give this to each other. So, Father's Day, graduation, birthdays, that would be one segment. Then people just looking for inspiration. It's an inspiring book. So this isn't necessarily a father-daughter connection, but just anyone who wants inspiration. So thinking about maybe hospital gift shops, people going through life transitions, that would be another segment. And then creating marketing strategies and campaigns in each of those segments, really keeping the end user in mind. And then for friends and family, how can we make sure this gets out to all our friends and family? So that was a third segment. And there were several more. But thinking of it in terms of your audience is really helpful in terms of reverse engineering a marketing plan.
And I agree with all of that. And what I would add to that is we also did some intentionality in terms of the quotations in the book. So not only did we have quotations from famous people and people who are no longer with us, but during our time of putting it together, we also solicited quotes from people we knew or people who were well known in the community. So it created a local interest and a regional interest, as well as just really high caliber content. So for our book launch, for example, some of the people whose quotations were in the book came and they read the quote that they had in the book, and then they explained why that quote was important to them. So the book launch wasn't just about Lizzie and me talking about the book, but it was really about people who had contributed their own content and their own thoughts, their own quotes, talking about it. And it became a really great event. And it's something that we duplicated elsewhere when we had various book events. So I think it made it very personal and broadened it so it wasn't just the authors, but the other contributors as well. So a number of people felt ownership around our publication by the time it was done.
And then what were some specific strategies that you guys did during the actual book launch? Because it sounds like you guys did a lot of things like before, after, and then during part of it too. But what were some specific book launch strategies that you thought were just amazing with this launch?
I think really tapping into the audiences that we wanted to reach, and then our networks of people who either were in that audience or people who would know people in those audiences. I think it's really powerful starting with the 1 and 2 degrees of separation. So, we would carry these books everywhere with us, and we would have little cards that we would give away explaining the book and talking about it. And you never know what meeting you're going to be at or who you're going to run into on the street that and that 1 degree and 2 degrees of friendship circles, and who's going to be interested in this book. So we would tell everyone about it. And then word of mouth is just so powerful, how people would then take the book or take the pamphlet that we give them and give it to their cousin or their friend. And just that organic reach was really powerful. And the amount of times we got emails or calls from people saying, my cousin gave me this book and it's been so helpful, and XYZ journey that I'm on was so motivating to keep going. So to sum all that up, just being your own advocate and being your own, like a walking marketing plan or marketing advertisement was really helpful for us. I know still to this day, I will often carry 1 or 2 books with me around, just because you never know who's going to be interested or who could help, and then ultimately help, launch more sales, and ultimately that benefits St Jude Children's Research Hospital. So that was something that I thought was really eye-opening.
Well, and I love the fact, too, that you've actually donated 100% of the profits to St Jude. I think that's just amazing.
Yeah, and that was something really important to us. Like my dad said, we had some pillars that we stuck to. Obviously, we're agile and flexible in how the book ended up forming, but there were certain pillars that we stood by. One was going to be a father-daughter book, and the second is we're going to do this for St Jude Children's Research Hospital. There are many quotes in our book about this, actually, but when you do something for for something that's bigger than yourself, it's just it's really impactful, and really it gives it a whole new level of meaning and purpose.
And if you don't mind me asking, what was the reason that you chose to donate 100% of the proceeds to St. Jude's?
Sure, Dad, I'll let you take this one.
So St. Jude Children's Research Hospital has been very important in our family. My father was one of the original board members of St. Jude Children's Research Hospital with Danny Thomas, who was the founder of the hospital, and they knew each other through their Middle Eastern heritage. So in 1957, when Danny Thomas had this idea of starting a hospital where no child should be denied care because of an inability to pay, and no child should die in the dawn of life, those were the two guiding principles, he called, among other people, my dad to ask him if he would help with this idea and make this idea a reality. And so my dad was on the original board of the hospital. I've had the privilege of being on the board and actually chairman of the fundraising and awareness organization called ALSAC, and now I'm vice chair of the St. Jude Children's Research Hospital Board. And Lizzie has also done a lot of fundraising and volunteer work for the hospital. So it's an integral part of our family and who we are. And so that was the impetus behind focusing on St. Jude.
Oh, that is wonderful, and I really appreciate you guys not only doing that, but also sharing the story too, because that's a rare thing, especially to donate 100% of the proceeds. So I have a lot of respect for you both for doing that.
Thank you very much.
Well, let's talk about your favorite book. So what is your favorite book, and what was the number one thing that you learned from it?
Whew. Okay. Well, I do love a ghost fiction book, but I will say I am finding myself more and more drawn to almost self-help books, or books that allow you to learn a lot, or something insightful that can help improve your life or quality of life. So I have to say two, if that's okay. But the first one is Dr. Michael Greger's book called How Not to Die. Kind of a catchy title, a little bit dramatic, but it's about the power of diet and how eating a nutrient-dense, plant-based or plant-centered diet can really prevent, heal, and reverse diseases. It's really powerful, reading the studies and the research. I actually studied integrative nutrition at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition this past year, and I'm a certified health coach on the side with a wellness blog and Instagram. So I find all of this really interesting, and just the importance of having a good diet is kind of what it goes back to. And then the second one is The Happiness Project by Gretchen Rubin. She just goes deep into the psychology and science around what makes people happier, and did this year-long experiment on herself and shares out all the learnings. And she says that only 50% of how happy we are at any given time is genetic, and the rest is essentially 10 or 20% up to life circumstances, but the rest is really malleable, and you can dramatically improve your happiness level. So I thought it was really helpful.
And for me, my book was Run to the Roar, which was written by the coach of the Trinity squash team. And it was at the time the winningest coach in college sports history. And it's Run to the Roar. And essentially the theme of the book is, when you have a challenge, it's important to face it and deal with it right away. And it's a good lesson in life. I would also say this, it's also a real good lesson for publishing a book, because there are so many challenges that, if you shy away from them, you'll never get the project done. And if you run right to them, you face them, you overcome them, you work through them. But that was the essence of what the book was. It was his philosophy as he coached his kids as his students for a long series of victories over many seasons.
And for our final question, what is your favorite quote and why?
Well, that's a very fitting question, considering we looked at quotes for a few years every single day. I still joke that my dad, I don't think I ever have a conversation with him where he doesn't talk in quotes, or at least throw in a quote here and there. But I will say, my personal favorite quote, and I'm glad it made it into the book, is "Be kind, for everyone you meet is fighting a hard battle." I think it's Ian McLaren. He's an author, and I think he's an author. I like that quote because you only see half of people's stories, and everyone has some struggle or battle or disappointment they're carrying. So it's important to remember that what you see isn't the full picture, and really try to see the best in people, because everyone's dealing with something, and we're all human. So just acting with love and with kindness is really important. And I try to live my life by that, truly.
And for me, first I want to say that our book has 12 chapters, and each chapter is one of our 12 guiding principles of life, and that's how we decided to develop the book. So it's really hard to pick one quote, because each chapter, each quote in the chapter means something to us, and that's how we designed the book, that you could only read one quote, and whichever quote you read would be a really strong quote. So it's the hardest question you could possibly ask, but I will offer one, and that is actually the founder of St Jude Children's Research Hospital, Danny Thomas, and he said, there are two kinds of people in the world, the givers and the takers, and the takers sometimes eat better, but the givers always sleep better. And I think that's been part of our, for both Lizzie and me and my wife Jane and our family, that's a phrase we live by, and hopefully inspires others who are listening today and who read the book.
Well, Lizzie and Paul, I want to thank you for being a guest on the show. What is the best way for people to find you both online?
So for me, if you have Instagram, you can find me at Live Well with Liz, and the blog that accompanies that is www.livewellwithliz.org.
And that would be the best way to find me as well, because Lizzie and I communicate all the time, so we'll make it easier for your listeners.
Well, thank you once again for being on the show, and I wish you all the best in your author journey ahead.
Thanks, Paul. Thanks for having us.
Thank you very much.
Thanks again for joining us today. To learn more about how you can be featured in our brand new Get Published business book, go to getpublishedpodcast.com.